Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you my process for storing my spring bulbs over the summer months. So let's go. On both sides of me, as well as behind me, are many pots of spring blooming bulbs. They are mostly daffodils as well as tulips. They looked really beautiful in this early springtime. I had them displayed on my porches and I thoroughly enjoyed them. I've made videos in the past showing you my process for potting up these bulbs, and I'll be sure to link any related videos down in the description below. But it's been well over 6 weeks since all of these bulbs bloomed, and that is generally the guideline. You want to wait at least 6 weeks until you store your bulbs. And I wanted to show you my process today for lifting and storing these bulbs. And I have even more bulbs in other pots. Many pots need to be emptied today. This will be a fun project for us to tackle together. I live in New Hampshire, Zone 5B, and here where I live, our climates are favorable for having tulips as well as daffodils planted in the fall time, and they get the chill hours that they need to then thoroughly and beautifully bloom in the spring months. However, I do enjoy planting bulbs in pots as well for a few reasons. Number one, I think it looks beautiful to decorate my porches in the springtime with spring blooming bulbs. Also, where I live, we have a lot of deer, and the deer love to nibble on the tulips. So I have better success planting my tulips in pots versus planting my tulips out in the landscape. Now I have a lot of daffodils out in my landscape, lots of beautiful varieties, but I also enjoy having daffodils in pots. I think the different variations of yellow and oranges looks beautiful in the pots to complement the tulips. I've been doing this process of planting bulbs in pots for 3 or 4 years, and each year I learn something different. So I'll be sure to share my experiences as we start emptying these pots and showing you my process on what I do next. Some of my pots have labels with them and some don't, but I'll be sure to keep the labels with the bulbs as we work on this project. It's been well over 6 weeks since these tulips bloomed, as well as the daffodils, so it's a perfect time for us to go ahead and start emptying out these pots. The first pot we're going to work on is it's a yellow tulip, and it's called Golden Parade. And it was really, really pretty when it bloomed. So there are a couple of things I could do here right now. I could take out these bulbs and I could put them out in my landscape. And if I didn't have deer pressure, that would be a great option. But I do have deer pressure, so I'm not going to go with that option. Another thing I could do is I could just cut off the foliage and I could just keep the tulips in this pot. And that is not a problem. I could definitely then have tulips again next year in this pot. And that's great if you only have, let's say, 1 or 2 pots. But since I have so many pots, I really don't feel that's the best option for me. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to be emptying out all these pots. You'll see that the tulips definitely have created a great root system in here. So what we want to do is just gently remove all the soil and loosen up all the roots. But the bulbs are nice and firm, so they can handle a little bit of abuse. And what's fun is you can see that here's the main parent bulb, and then it created a little baby bulb. Now that baby bulb could get discarded, or you could grow it on next year knowing that it's only going to produce leaves. But that's okay. I don't like to discard my bulbs if I don't have to. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the roots on for right now, knowing that in a few days, 2 days from now, I'll come in and I'll remove these roots. So the next step is we're going to go ahead and we're just going to clip off this part here. Now you don't want to hurt the bulb, so I'm just going to cut it right about here. This can go in my compost pile. And let's go ahead and do the same process with the rest of the bulbs. And actually now is a good time for me to divide or remove the baby bulbs from the parent bulbs, because what's going to happen is I want all of these bulbs to be on their own so that they have enough time to dry or cure. And I'm also checking to make sure that the bulbs are all firm. If there's a bulb that is not firm and is rotting, it just feels soft or smushy, at this point I would want to remove that. And I probably wouldn't even put that in my compost pile. That could just go out in the trash. When it comes to tulips, as well as daffodils, there's a certain size, um, basically, that if you were to measure it, that would tell you whether or not your tulip will bloom next year. If I should find that information, I'll put it up on the screen. And that's why some people just throw away or discard these baby tulips. They don't want to deal with having to grow them on to a bigger size. This one here feels a little soft on the outside, so I'm just removing the outside part. But on the inside, it actually feels firm. And when it comes to these bulbs, they were in their pots. I was not giving them any additional water. They were just getting rainwater and that's it. And that's good because that's basically telling the bulbs to start becoming dormant. And notice I'm not trying to remove too much of the layers here. That will naturally come off after a few days when the bulbs have completely dried. What I'm going to do next is take the bulbs that we've collected and I'm going to put them in this 10 by 20 solid bottom tray that I have on hand. You can put them in whatever you want. You just want to make sure that you're spacing them out enough so that they're not touching each other. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be letting them cure or dry at this point. You absolutely could have cut or removed some of the roots. I'm choosing right now just to leave them on. That's quite a few bulbs right there. And we want to make sure that we add our tag in here. And I just want to quickly sift through here and make sure that we didn't leave any bulbs behind. And I'm glad we did because here's one right there. And what's nice is with this potting soil, I can then go ahead and use it for a different project, like one of my window boxes or container pots that I'm going to be using around the landscape. And you wouldn't want to reuse the potting mix if there was any diseased bulbs in here or anything like that, or insect pressure. We are currently in my barn. You can basically take these and store them somewhere where it's cool and dry. It could be a shed, it can be a garage. You want to make sure that it's not too hot wherever you're going to be curing them. And you also want to make sure they're out of direct sunlight. And this is a perfect place for me to let these dry. I'm going to let them dry for 2 days. The next pot that we're going to work on are daffodils, and they are from Color Blends. I got these from my sister-in-law a few years ago. We're going to go ahead and do the same process. On one hand, it would be pretty easy for me to just go ahead and plunk these out in my landscape or out in the ground, and then in the fall just buy new bulbs. But we're all about gardening on a budget. And so it's worth the little bit of effort to do what I'm doing. And, in the end, I'm going to end up with a lot more bulbs than I did last year because, as you know, bulbs multiply. So we're doing the same thing. We're just removing the dirt. We are cutting off as much of the stem as we can, but we don't want to harm our bulbs, so we're going to leave a little bit of the stem on top. And in cases where we have two bulbs that are connected, if we can, we're going to try to tease them apart because it's a great time to divide our bulbs. You just want to make sure you're gentle. And we got quite a few daffodils out of that pot, which is very exciting. Well, 2 pots down, many more to go. I'm going to follow the same exact process, and then the next thing we'll talk about is my process for storing these bulbs. Guess what? There are no more pots here, which is super exciting because I needed room so I can open up these compost bins, mix it up, and start heating it up. And there were some pots here, not anymore. Yay! And here are just some of the many bulbs. It's just so much better to do it this way than throw the bulbs away each year. There's some more over here, and then some more over here. So other than tulips as well as daffodils, I did find some Glory of the Snow bulbs that were in some of the pots. So I also emptied those pots out and will be storing those bulbs as well. And actually, I think next year I'm going to experiment with the Glory of the Snow mixed with some of the daffodils and the tulips. I think that would look really pretty. While I was working on this project, I did think of a few things I definitely wanted to share with you. One of them was when you pull out the bulbs out of the pot, you can leave the stalk, the stem on there if you want, and you can let it dry naturally on the bulb. Some people say that by doing so, it's still giving a little bit of energy, food to the bulb. I've never done that, but you definitely can do that if you want to. And I wondered, do you want me to make another video showing you my process for actually taking those bulbs and preparing them for storage? I'd love to hear from you. If you do want me to make another video showing you my process, I can definitely do that. It will be about 1 week from now because I'm going to wait for those bulbs to really dry and cure. And the other thing I wanted to share with you was after they've dried for a few days and I remove the roots from the bottom and remove any other soil or dirt from around the bulbs, that might open up some areas on the bulbs. It might make it a little bit wet again. So they're drying, but by brushing off some of the soil, it might just basically brush a little bit of the bulb and get it wet again. I guess what I'm saying is then I will wait another day or two to make sure they are fully dry. You don't want to store your bulbs and when they're wet because there is a chance that you're going to have rot in there if you do that. And a big reason I'm sharing this video with you is you might also have bulbs that were in pots. Maybe you got them during the holidays or someone gave it to you as a gift and you don't know what to do with it. So hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, I'd love it if you could hit the like button. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. As always, if you have any questions, please drop them down in the comment section below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening. Oh, and in case you're wondering what I'm doing with all that soil that came from all those pots, well, I'm recycling the soil. I'm using it in all of these pots here, and I'm planning on putting either vegetables or flowers in these pots. So I'm putting the soil to good use. Okay, no lie. I just got back from my daughter's work and I picked her up and they had a bunch of daffodils. The owner of the veterinary clinic said I could take them, which was super nice. And I only took some because I still have to go back and dig some more. But these are awesome. Look how huge they are. So my job here is not done yet, people. So I'm excited about this. I wanted to mention a few more things that I forgot. And while I was driving, I remembered some things. So when I was pulling apart the tulip bulbs, some of them were squishy and disgusting and gross. But inside of that disgusting and gross squishiness, there were some parts of the bulb that were still viable. So it was like operation. I was taking the bulb apart and discarding the squishy parts, but keeping some of the parts that were still firm inside. So keep that in mind, like when you're digging up bulbs, especially out of a pot, and they're starting to rot a little bit, some part of that bulb might still be viable. I noticed that more with the tulips than with the daffodils. And then the other thing that I thought about is, in case I don't make a follow-up video on how to store all of this, I figured I'd quickly tell you my process that worked for me last year. What I'm going to do is after a few days have gone by and I brush off any dirt and cut back any roots, then what I'll do is wait another day or two. And after that, I'm going to take the bulbs and I just put them in a paper bag You don't want to put them in plastic, either a plastic bag or a plastic tote. You need those bulbs to breathe. So a cardboard box, a paper bag, or one of those mesh bags, like when you buy onions, you could use something like that. And then I'm going to be putting them in my basement. That's what I did last year. It stays nice and cool down there. It's generally about 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, I'd say, in the coolest part of my basement. So that's where I'm going to keep them, and I'm going to keep them there all summer long. You don't want to store them where it's going to be hot. You want to make sure that your bulbs are dormant. And then the final thing I wanted to share was when it comes time to take those bulbs out of dormancy, out of storage, and to plant them, this year I am going to be planting them much later than I usually plant them. I normally plant them around the same time I would be planting them in the ground, which would be in the fall time. But what I noticed was that the bulbs start sprouting and coming to life because they're in pots. You know, once I pot them up, they're in my garage during the winter months. But the garage is still kind of warm in the fall time, and so those bulbs start waking up. This year, I will not be planting the bulbs until middle of winter, maybe January or February. I did that with some of the bulbs this past winter, and I noticed that those bulbs did so much better than the ones that I had planted early on. So timing is everything. And again, I'm sharing my experience based on where I live here in New Hampshire, Zone 5B. So your experience might be totally different. So just keep that in mind. My garage in the winter months stays about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the perfect temperature for the chilling of the bulbs. But if you live somewhere where it's warm, you have to put your bulbs like in a refrigerator to give them that chill time. So a lot of things to consider. But of course, if you have any questions, drop them down below and I can help you regardless of where you live, be it in the US or outside of the US. So I just wanted to share these couple of additional little secrets, tips, and the fact that I got more bulbs.